The morning fog hung thick over London when retired Royal Guard Captain William Hartwell made the decision that would shake the monarchy to its core. After 35 years of silent service, the 67-year-old veteran sat in his modest countryside cottage, staring at a yellowed envelope that had haunted him for decades. Inside that envelope lay evidence of a secret so profound that it could rewrite royal history. The late Queen, beloved by millions worldwide, had given birth to a son that the world never knew existed. This wasn't speculation or gossip from palace corridors. This was documented truth, witnessed by Hartwell himself during his early years as a junior guard stationed at a remote Scottish estate. The story began in 1963, when a young Hartwell was assigned to Balmoral's sister property, a secluded manor house nestled deep in the Highlands. The assignment seemed routine, but the level of security was anything but ordinary. Only 3 guards were permitted on the grounds, each sworn to absolute secrecy under threat of treason charges. Hartwell remembered the autumn evening when everything changed. He was conducting his regular perimeter check when he heard the unmistakable sound of a newborn's cry echoing from the manor's east wing. The wing that had been declared off-limits to all staff, except the Queen's most trusted physician and a single midwife, brought in from Edinburgh. The young guard's training told him to ignore what he'd heard, but human curiosity proved stronger. Through a partially opened window, he glimpsed a scene that would burn itself into his memory forever. The Queen, exhausted but radiant, cradling a baby boy while speaking in hushed, urgent tones with a man Hartwell didn't recognize. The man wasn't the Duke of Edinburgh. He was younger, with dark hair and kind eyes, dressed in civilian clothes rather than royal regalia. The tenderness between the Queen and this stranger spoke of a love affair that had produced the most dangerous secret in British history. What happened next shocked Hartwell even more. Within hours, a nondescript car arrived under cover of darkness. The mysterious man departed with the infant, while the Queen watched from her window, tears streaming down her face. The official palace records would never acknowledge this birth, this child, or this heart-wrenching separation. For years, Hartwell convinced himself he'd imagined it all. The stress of royal protection duty could play tricks on one's mind. But then came the confirmation he never wanted. During a routine security briefing in 1975, he overheard a conversation between 2 senior officials discussing arrangements for a special education fund directed to a boarding school in Switzerland. The details were sparse, but Hartwell caught enough to understand. A boy, now 12 years old, was being privately educated under an assumed identity. The Queen personally oversaw his welfare through discreet channels, but could never acknowledge him publicly without destroying the monarchy's carefully maintained image. Hartwell began his own careful investigation, using his security clearance to access files that painted a picture of elaborate deception. Birth records had been altered, witnesses relocated to distant Commonwealth nations, and an entire network established to support this hidden prince's existence while keeping him forever separated from his royal heritage. The boy's guardian family believed they were raising the orphaned son of a deceased diplomat. They provided love and stability, never suspecting their adoptive child's true parentage. Meanwhile, the Queen lived with the daily agony of watching her other children grow up in the palace, while her secret son remained a stranger. Over the decades, Hartwell watched this hidden prince from afar. The young man excelled academically, showed remarkable leadership qualities, and possessed an uncanny resemblance to his mother's side of the royal family. He pursued a career in international humanitarian work, drawn to service in a way that seemed to echo his royal blood. The Queen's death changed everything for Hartwell. With her passing, the moral weight of keeping this secret shifted entirely to him. The hidden prince, now in his late 50s, had lived his entire life believing a lie about his identity. He had children of his own who carried royal blood without knowing it. More troubling still, Hartwell had learned that others knew pieces of the truth. Palace insiders, government officials, even some foreign intelligence services had gathered fragments of information over the years. The secret that three people had once shared now existed in dozens of minds, each piece a potential bomb waiting to explode. The retired guard's decision to come forward wasn't driven by desire for attention or monetary gain. His modest pension provided adequately for his needs, and at his age, fame held no appeal. Instead, Hartwell felt a profound moral obligation to the Hidden Prince himself. This man deserved to know who he truly was. He deserved to understand why he'd always felt different, why certain mannerisms and preferences seemed to emerge from nowhere, why he possessed an instinctive understanding of duty and service that his adoptive family couldn't explain. Hartwell also recognized the broader implications. If the truth emerged through less controlled channels, it could destabilize not just the British monarchy, but the entire Commonwealth structure. Better to reveal it responsibly with proper context and documentation than to let it explode as scandal or conspiracy theory. The evidence Hartwell had assembled over decades was comprehensive but required careful presentation. Birth records, financial transactions, travel logs, and testimony from the few remaining witnesses who could be convinced to speak. Most crucially, DNA evidence that could prove the connection beyond any doubt. As Hartwell prepared to make his revelation public, he thought about the Queen's final years. She had carried this burden in absolute solitude after the deaths of those who'd shared her secret. The weight of it had been visible to those who knew how to look, a shadow behind her public composure. The Hidden Prince continued his humanitarian work, unaware that his mother had watched his achievements from afar with pride she could never express. Every award he received, every life he touched through his charitable efforts, every moment of happiness in his family life had been both a joy and a torture for the Queen. Now Hartwell held the key to unlocking a truth that would forever change how the world understood the beloved monarch. She had been human in ways the public never imagined, capable of a love so profound that she sacrificed everything to protect both her secret son and the institution she served. The revelation would transform the Hidden Prince from an accomplished but ordinary humanitarian into a member of the most famous family on Earth. It would give him siblings he'd never known existed and explain the void he'd always felt but couldn't name. As Hartwell sealed his evidence in a secure package addressed to the world's media, he whispered a prayer for the royal family, for the Hidden Prince, and for a nation about to learn that their fairy tale monarchy had harbored the most human secret of all. The world was about to discover that love, sacrifice, and heartbreak existed even in palaces, and that sometimes the greatest acts of royal duty required the deepest personal sacrifice. The media explosion that followed Hartwell's revelation created a frenzy unlike anything the royal family had experienced since the princess's death decades earlier. Every major news outlet scrambled to verify his claims while palace officials maintained their traditional silence, neither confirming nor denying the extraordinary allegations. Behind closed doors, however, panic reigned. Emergency meetings convened at all hours as royal advisors, government ministers, and security chiefs grappled with the implications. If Hartwell's story proved true, it wouldn't just be a scandal, it would fundamentally alter the line of succession and raise questions about what other secrets the monarchy might be hiding. The Hidden Prince himself, a man named David Harrison, who had spent 59 years believing himself to be the son of deceased diplomats, watched the unfolding drama with bewilderment. Working from his modest London office where he coordinated refugee relief efforts across Africa, he found himself suddenly surrounded by reporters desperate for his reaction to claims that seemed too incredible to believe. Harrison's first instinct was complete disbelief. The woman he'd always been told was his adoptive mother had died 5 years earlier, taking any chance of confirmation to her grave. His adoptive father had passed even earlier, in 1998, leaving behind only fragmentary memories of how Harrison had come to join their family as an infant. Yet as Harrison examined his life through this new lens, disturbing patterns emerged. He'd always possessed an inexplicable knowledge of royal protocol, correctly identifying proper forms of address and ceremonial procedures without any formal education in such matters. Friends often commented on his uncanny ability to predict royal family reactions to various situations. More troubling were the physical resemblances that Harrison had never considered significant. His height matched several royal family members precisely. His facial structure, particularly around the eyes and jaw, bore striking similarities to the Queen's younger photographs. Even his hands, with their distinctive long fingers and particular way of holding objects, seemed to echo royal mannerisms. The Swiss boarding school Hartwell mentioned in his testimony proved to be another piece of the puzzle. Harrison clearly remembered his years at Institut La Rosey, one of the world's most exclusive educational establishments. His adoptive parents had explained the expensive education as being funded by his birth parents' estate, but Harrison now realized no such estate had ever existed. Financial records that investigative journalists began uncovering told a different story entirely. Anonymous trusts had funded Harrison's education, healthcare, and early career development. These trusts, when traced through layers of legal documentation, led back to accounts traditionally used for discretionary royal expenditures. The investigation expanded beyond Harrison's personal history to examine the broader conspiracy required to maintain such a secret for nearly 6 decades. How had birth records been altered? Who had orchestrated the cover story? What had happened to the original witnesses? And why had they remained silent for so long? Hartwell's documentation provided answers to some questions while raising others. The midwife who attended the secret birth had emigrated to Australia within months, provided with a generous settlement and a new identity. The Queen's personal physician had maintained his silence until his death, but had left sealed records with instructions they be opened only after the Queen's passing. Those records, now in the possession of investigative teams, contained medical documentation that seemed to confirm Hartwell's account. Detailed notes described a pregnancy carefully concealed through strategic scheduling of royal engagements and the use of specially designed clothing. The Queen had managed to hide her condition from even her closest staff through a combination of careful planning and absolute determination. The identity of Harrison's biological father remained the most sensitive aspect of the investigation. Hartwell's testimony suggested a love affair with a commoner, someone outside the aristocratic circles from which royal spouses were traditionally chosen. This man had apparently agreed to disappear completely from both the Queen's life and his son's, accepting financial compensation in exchange for absolute silence. Palace sources, speaking anonymously, began confirming elements of Hartwell's story while maintaining official denial. One former equerry admitted that certain unexplained absences in the Queen's schedule during 1963 had always puzzled royal historians. Another retired staff member recalled unusual security arrangements at remote royal properties during that period. The Commonwealth governments faced their own challenges as the story developed. If Harrison's legitimacy was confirmed, questions arose about his potential claims to succession rights. Legal experts debated whether a secret son, acknowledged by none of the traditional processes, could have any standing in the constitutional monarchy structure. Harrison himself struggled with the personal implications of potentially being thrust into royal life at nearly 60 years of age. His entire identity centered around his humanitarian work, not ceremonial duties or constitutional responsibilities. The idea of suddenly becoming a public figure subjected to constant media scrutiny felt overwhelming. His family situation complicated matters further. Harrison's wife of 32 years had married a humanitarian aid worker, not a potential royal. Their two adult children pursued normal careers in medicine and education, unprepared for the dramatic shift in status their father's revelation might bring. DNA testing became the crucial next step, but even this straightforward scientific procedure carried political implications. Which royal family members might provide comparison samples? How could testing be conducted without appearing to legitimize Harrison's claims before verification? The palace's continued silence made cooperation uncertain. Harrison's physical health added urgency to the situation. Recent medical checkups had revealed early signs of the same hereditary condition that affected several royal family members, providing additional circumstantial evidence of his parentage. If genetic testing confirmed his royal lineage, his medical history might require immediate attention from royal physicians. The international response varied dramatically across different nations. Republican-leaning countries viewed the revelation as evidence that monarchies harbored fundamental deceptions. Traditional allies of Britain worried about constitutional stability if succession questions arose. Commonwealth realms faced the prospect of potentially having overlooked legitimate royal family members for decades. Media coverage intensified as more witnesses emerged with pieces of the puzzle. A former Swiss school administrator remembered Harrison's unusually frequent visits from family friends, who seemed to monitor his progress without identifying themselves as relatives. A London banker recalled managing anonymous payments for a client whose identity was never revealed, but whose financial instructions came through official government channels. Harrison's humanitarian colleagues provided character testimony that painted him as someone naturally suited for leadership and service. His instinctive understanding of diplomatic protocol, his ability to communicate effectively with world leaders, and his deep sense of duty had always distinguished him from his peers. These qualities, they now realized, might have been expressions of royal breeding rather than simply personal development. The psychological impact on Harrison proved as significant as the practical implications. Learning at nearly 60 that his entire life story was constructed, fiction challenged his fundamental sense of identity. Every memory of his adoptive parents, every assumption about his background, every belief about his place in the world suddenly required re-examination. Therapeutic support became necessary as Harrison processed the magnitude of the deception that had shaped his existence. Professional counselors specializing in identity disclosure helped him understand that his moral character and life achievements remained unchanged regardless of his parentage. But the emotional adjustment proved more complex than logical acceptance. As DNA test results approached, the world waited for scientific confirmation of what increasingly seemed like an incredible but true story. The revelation had already changed Harrison's life irrevocably, but genetic proof would transform him from a man with an extraordinary claim into a legitimate member of the most famous family on Earth. The DNA results arrived on a gray Tuesday morning that would forever divide Harrison's life into before and after. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the independent geneticist overseeing the testing, delivered news that sent shockwaves around the world. David Harrison was indeed the biological son of the late Queen, with genetic markers confirming his relationship with a 99.97% certainty. The scientific proof transformed speculation into undeniable fact. Harrison, the man who had dedicated his life to helping refugees and coordinating international humanitarian relief, was suddenly the Queen's eldest son, and, according to traditional succession laws, should have been ahead of the current king in line to the throne. The palace could no longer maintain its silence. In an unprecedented statement, royal officials acknowledged the test results while emphasizing that Harrison's birth outside marriage and his lack of official recognition meant he had no constitutional claim to succession rights. This legal interpretation sparked immediate debate among constitutional scholars and succession experts worldwide. Harrison's first public appearance after the confirmation revealed a man transformed by knowledge of his true identity. Speaking from his London office, surrounded by the humanitarian awards and recognition he'd earned through decades of service, he addressed the world with a dignity that seemed innately royal. He spoke of forgiveness for those who had hidden his identity, understanding the impossible position his birth had created for his mother and the monarchy. Rather than expressing anger or demanding recognition, Harrison emphasized his intention to continue his humanitarian work while exploring what relationship, if any, he might develop with his newly discovered siblings. The current king's response proved crucial in determining how the revelation would reshape the royal family. After days of private consultation with advisors, constitutional experts, and government officials, he made a decision that surprised many observers. He invited Harrison to a private meeting, the first step toward acknowledging his half-brother's existence while maintaining the constitutional order. Their meeting, held at a private residence away from media attention, lasted several hours and marked the beginning of a relationship that had been impossible during their mother's lifetime. The king found himself facing a brother who was older, more experienced in real-world challenges, and completely free from the protocols and restrictions that had shaped royal life. Harrison's other siblings responded with varying degrees of acceptance and curiosity. Some welcomed the opportunity to know a brother they had never suspected existed, while others struggled with the implications of their mother's deception. The family dynamics shifted as they processed the reality that their beloved mother had carried this enormous secret throughout their entire lives. The revelation also shed new light on the Queen's character and the personal sacrifices she had made for duty. Her decision to give up her eldest son to preserve the monarchy's stability revealed depths of personal anguish that the public had never imagined. Rather than diminishing her legacy, this human dimension seemed to increase public admiration for her strength and commitment. Harrison's biological father's identity remained protected by legal agreements and mutual consent. Now in his 80s and living quietly in rural England, he had watched the revelation unfold with a mixture of pride in his son's achievements and relief that their secret was finally ended. His agreement to remain anonymous respected both his privacy and Harrison's desire to avoid further complications. The impact on Harrison's immediate family proved complex, but ultimately strengthening. His wife, initially overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of their private lives, found herself adapting to a role she never anticipated. Their children struggled with the attention and scrutiny that came with royal connections, but took pride in their father's grace under extraordinary circumstances. Harrison's humanitarian organization faced unprecedented challenges and opportunities. Donations poured in from supporters fascinated by the idea of supporting a royal humanitarian, but Harrison insisted on maintaining the same standards and goals that had guided his work for decades. He refused to exploit his newfound status for fundraising while accepting that increased visibility might ultimately benefit the refugees and displaced persons his organization served. The constitutional implications continued to generate debate across the Commonwealth. Legal experts argued over whether Harrison's situation created precedents for other potential royal family complications. Some nations began reviewing their own succession laws to address similar scenarios, while others reaffirmed their commitment to traditional protocols. Harrison's decision about his future role became the focus of intense speculation. Would he accept any formal recognition from the royal family? Might he be granted a title that acknowledged his parentage without threatening the succession? How would he balance his humanitarian calling with any royal responsibilities he might choose to accept? His choice, announced 3 months after the DNA confirmation, reflected the character that had defined his life's work. Harrison would accept the title of Royal Patron for International Humanitarian Relief, a newly created position that honored both his parentage and his life's dedication to serving others. He would participate in selected royal engagements focused on charitable work while maintaining his independence and continuing to live primarily as a private citizen. The arrangement satisfied multiple competing interests. Harrison received acknowledgement of his identity without disrupting constitutional order. The royal family gained a member whose genuine humanitarian credentials enhanced their public service mission. The monarchy demonstrated its ability to adapt to extraordinary circumstances while maintaining stability. Harrison's first official royal engagement took place 6 months after Hartwell's initial revelation. Standing beside his half-brother, the king, at a reception for international aid workers, Harrison embodied the bridge between royal tradition and modern humanitarian values. His natural ease with world leaders and deep knowledge of global relief efforts impressed observers who noted his unique qualifications for royal service. The media coverage of Harrison's transition from hidden humanitarian to acknowledged royal revealed public fascination with his story's human elements. Here was someone who had unknowingly lived as royal without the privileges, developing genuine empathy for those facing hardship while possessing the intellectual and emotional capabilities that royal training might have enhanced, but clearly hadn't been necessary to create. Harrison's relationship with his mother's memory evolved as he learned more about her personal struggles. Through conversations with former palace staff and access to private papers, he discovered evidence of the Queen's ongoing concern for his welfare throughout his life. Anonymous donations to his humanitarian efforts, strategic interventions when his work faced bureaucratic obstacles, and careful monitoring of his health and happiness revealed a mother's love that had never been allowed direct expression. The Swiss finishing school records provided particularly poignant insights. The Queen had arranged for regular reports on Harrison's academic and personal development, celebrating his achievements from afar while maintaining the painful distance their situation required. These documents showed a woman who had sacrificed the joy of watching her son grow up, but never stopped caring about his well-being. Harrison's own children gradually adapted to their unexpected royal connections while maintaining the values their parents had instilled. Their father's example of using privilege responsibly, whether previously hidden or newly revealed, guided their approach to the attention and opportunities that came with their changed circumstances. The long-term impact of Harrison's revelation extended beyond the immediate royal family to influence public perceptions of monarchy itself. The story demonstrated that even the most traditional institutions harbored human complexities and that duty sometimes required heartbreaking personal sacrifices. Rather than undermining respect for the monarchy, Harrison's existence seemed to humanize it in ways that increased public understanding and sympathy. As Harrison settled into his unique role as acknowledged royal humanitarian, he reflected on the extraordinary journey from hidden truth to public recognition. His mother's secret had been revealed not through scandal or conspiracy, but through one man's conscience and a family's eventual acceptance that love could transcend protocol. The world had gained not just another royal, but a bridge between the elevated symbolism of monarchy and the practical realities of global humanitarian need. In Harrison, the royal family found a member whose legitimacy came not just from blood, but from a lifetime of service that embodied the highest ideals of royal duty.